Hello, Mizzo here. I wanted to introduce myself because I'm not wearing a scarf today. I forgot it at home, so I didn't know if you'd recognize me. But that's appropriate because we're talking about ceremonial speeches today. Which one of those is an introduction speech? You'll hear these called ceremonial speeches, special occasion speeches. The fancy communication word, are you ready for it, is epidictic speaking, which of course we get from Aristotle, right? For those of you that have read the rhetoric, where he's identifying different types of speeches, right? He's talking about political, forensic. Fun side note, forensic speaking came first, and from that they developed forensic science. The first time someone used evidence from a body in a courtroom and spoke about it, then that was forensic science was born from forensic speaking. But Aristotle quoted that first. And then epidictic speaking, which is ceremonial or special occasion speaking. And what that means is to praise or to blame. That is the sort of core, right? If a speech is doing that, that's epidictic ceremonial speaking. Now, do ceremonial speeches often persuade? Of course. Do they often give information? Yes. We know that these are not exact lines and sciences, right? So my goal is to teach you some of the functions and types so that you can sort of recognize, but the big goal, of course, is to understand this so that you can continue to process and make choices for your particular situations when you have to give a speech, right? So that's the goal. So if you're going through and you just find yourself watching because I told you to watch or listening to me because you think you have to listen to me because I'm your teacher, try to reset and go, okay, how could I use this? How will this help me? What are opportunities I'm going to have and how can I be thinking about this, right? And I would argue that one of the biggest things about special occasion speaking is the audience. And I know you're like, Mizzo, what's new, right? You always say it's the audience. You're always telling a story about the audience, especially in persuasion, right? But the thing about epidictic speaking is that often the whole reason you're there is the audience. So, right, in persuasive speaking, often the speaker has a drive or a passion. And when you get to the examples of like the motivational, inspirational speeches, that's more of that, right? They're often TED Talks or lectures. Stephen Hawking, I have as one of the examples talking at MIT. And so you'll see that. But a lot of the other examples, right, are acceptance speeches or eulogies or farewell speeches. And so the audience and the moment is the entire reason. Like the context becomes so specific. I mean, the context is always important, right? I'm always dancing about the context of a situation, yeah, because I think that's what makes it, right? And that's why we have to process every time because we've got all those details. I mean, I've been doing this many years and I still can't automatically know the answers. I got to do the same process. You just get better and better at it, right? So thinking about the audience and the circumstance and the intersection of the audience and why they're there. And what often makes it more complicated is that sometimes the audience is multi-layered. So I think the best example of this is a wedding toast. When you watch a wedding toast, how many of you have seen a wedding toast that wasn't very good because it was only meant for the bride or the groom, whoever the person is connected to, right? And they didn't include the other person and they said all these inside jokes and maybe they were kind of mean. I find that wedding toasts often have this like, stereotypical jokes about ball and chain or you're stealing them away from me. And they're often not actually funny. They're just sort of recycled. Or they'll say some like super embarrassing story that's like, comes off as kind of mean if you don't know the details and the person doesn't seem to mind but the audience is kind of going so you're giving it for the person, right? And often speeches like that will say things like, there's an example on the list that's like, I've always loved you. She's like talking directly to the bride, right? But also, you've got all these other audience members there, some of who know you and some of who don't. You'll notice a lot of the speeches, a lot of the toasts start with, for those of you who don't know me, I am, right? And I am the brother of the groom or sister, best friend to the bride, that kind of thing, contexting, right? So thinking about all of the audience and how to multi-layer that in, I included some examples that were a little cringe. And then I have some examples that I think walk the line kind of nicely, where there's one really funny maid of honor speech where, I mean, she is just roasting the bride, but it is done in such a way that the humor hits. Like, we know she's joking, and a lot of it is really well crafted. She's also speaking from a manuscript, and I think she could be looking up a lot more. You'll know that right away. You'll go, oh, Ms. O wants her to look up more and not read. But there are a lot of different types of special occasion speeches. Anytime there's an occasion, right? Like, and it's special, right? Even keynotes, which I think often are also persuasive speeches or informative speeches, get put in somehow. So, I mean, in a lot of ways, most speeches could be constructed as a special occasion speech. That being said, I just want to make sure that you know the functions of a special occasion speech. So the book outlines 4 main functions. The first one is to entertain and celebrate, and that's combined. Secondly, to commemorate. I included Oprah's farewell speech, and I don't know if any of you were, paying attention. You were young when Oprah's, TV show ended. But I mean, I watched, it was a 2-day, multi-hour celebration with all these guests. So tons of intro speeches, tons of performances. So cool. When they introduced Michael Jordan, I remember being like, oh, here he comes. Because I could tell who it was because they were in the house of Michael Jordan. It was incredible. To inspire and motivate, I would put under that. And then finally to advocate. And as you can assume, most speeches combine those, right? Most speeches are doing some combination of those. I am not going to go through the types of speeches because there are so many and the book lays them all out. And as you can assume, again, the book is constructed in putting them in groups, and we could argue about where they go and how they go and that kind of thing. I want to give you just a couple of really quick tips when you're thinking about doing this type of speech. Since you're doing it for us, we need to become the audience, and that needs to be clear who we are. And I don't want you to tell us that. I don't want you to say, this is a eulogy for, or this is a toast for, right? Like, it's in the, right? Like, thank you all for coming today. It's kind of weird that we're all gathered here on this nice sunny day for the eulogy of, right? Like, something that weaves in why we're there and who we are. I've had this done really creatively in class. One of my favorites was when she started talking, thank you all for being here on this sad day for, the eulogy of, forget the name, Ryan, it wasn't right, Bub was blah, 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 blah. We're so, it's like, we assume as a grandpa, right? And getting kind of sad. And then she's like, and he was such a sweet rat to us all. And so she was giving eulogy for her pet rat and then talked, right? Like, it was a beautiful reveal. We all knew why we were there. It was lovely, right? So you want to make sure that you're really thinking about the audience. You're really thinking about the occasion, and that you're doing the goal of the occasion. So if it is to praise and toast, that you're doing that. If it's to introduce, that you're doing that. The Kobe Bryant eulogy is quite lovely. Even just the first couple minutes to watch Michael Jordan. I mean, I love Michael Jordan, so I know, surprising that I like a sports thing. I love Michael Jordan. Oh my God, so much. But he does a brilliant job, and what I love about that is like there are some references in there that are still good for the audience, right? So he references the famous Bulls triangle defense, but doesn't explain what it is. And if you're a Bulls fan or a basketball fan, you know what the triangle defense is, and you know that that Phil Jackson ran it for the Bulls. And if you don't, it's not distracting, right? It doesn't take you away from it. So it's just in general sort of a good example of how you can reference and include, not, you're not excluding people, but also if there's added meaning, intertextual meaning that people are bringing, that it's extra good, right? I also have Kobe Bryant's farewell speech, his last NBA game, down on the list. So bunch of different types of examples, bunch of different ways people approach these types of speeches. My big tip is that if you can find some kind of organizational framework, usually the speech is a lot user-friendly and a lot more enjoyable. So a couple examples of this. I had a student years ago do the final speech for my class where she brought her guitar and she sang the song, the Alanis Morissette song that's on my syllabus as my teaching philosophy. So she'd sing like a line, it's you live, you learn. So she'd sing, you live, you learn, you love, you learn, and then she'd apply it. She'd stop, she'd sing like maybe a couple lines, and then she'd apply them. She'd stop and speak, and then she'd sing a line or two, and then stop and speak. And so the song became a clear outline. Does that make sense? Sometimes people will use analogies. So, why moving in together is like, making food, or you know what I mean? Like, and then they'll apply the analogy as they go throughout. In chapter 13 that I wrote in the textbook you're reading, right, I used the analogy of cake and food and sort of like use that as a setup to lead us through then the concept of delivery. So sometimes people use acronyms, right? You don't have to have something like that, but a lot of times that can really ground us into a structure, whereas otherwise it kind of feels like train of thought. You may want to like get down all your thoughts and then think about how you might piece them together. A lot of times people go chronological if they're talking about somebody. Sometimes people use themes, right? That then they like apply throughout. You want some type of structure so that the audience can hear you and follow you. And remember, you're not writing an essay. So you don't want it to feel like an essay because we can't go back and read. You want to think about how the audience can hear you and how you might then use delivery to allow us to hear you and feel the things you want us to feel and comprehend the things you want us to understand. So all the things we've learned about speeches, you're still applying those things. But, this is slightly different, and you're thinking about those things in slightly different ways. And the emphases, the things that are emphasized are slightly different, right? So go read the book chapter. Now you've watched this. Now you can go and look at the massive list of examples that I have. I tried to star the ones that I like to show in class. A lot of them are long, so do not feel like you have to watch all of it. I mean, you could just click on every link and watch the first minute of every one if you just wanted to see a bunch of different styles. You could pick and choose which ones to watch. If you've got a lot of free time and a house to clean, you could watch all of them, right? You do you. Let me know if you have any questions. Make sure you are very carefully reading the assignment sheet for the ceremonial speech. I might have called it special occasion speaking. We use those interchangeably a lot. Some scholar has probably talked about how they're slightly different, but even the book chapter is ceremonial speaking, and then they just talk about special occasion speaking. So, so be thinking about what type you want to do, what function you're really thinking about. The last thing that I'll say, I forgot to mention this when I talked about to entertain and celebrate. The last thing I'll say is a lot of times these speeches, and even some of the wedding toasts are marked funny, right? So a lot of these speeches, people will try to be funny. And I when I teach advanced public speaking, we spend a whole section on this. And in a lot of communication classes, there's a whole study about humor. I wouldn't try to be funny. I find that when people try to be funny, one, it puts a lot of pressure on you. And two, it doesn't typically work. You can typically tell that someone is trying to be funny. Often, things that are the most humorous are the things that are well crafted, well thought out, and entertaining, right? They have humor in them because they're built in reality. They have humor in them because they're thought out and connect to things in a really cool way. So don't try to make the audience laugh. Try to think about what is entertaining and honest and genuine. And then my guess is a lot of that will end up being funny. And you can always tailor it, right? You can always record yourself and go, oh, if I said it like this, it would be funnier. I mean, hopefully you can tell in the videos, I like to be entertaining. And sometimes I think I'm funny and the audience doesn't. I thought I was hilarious while I was in labor. Matthew said I was not. I thought I was so funny, right? So don't put that pressure on yourself. Work to be entertaining. Because a lot of times people think you're really funny and they're not laughing. And if you are then, they're like, oh God, they're not laughing, right? And that's a lot of pressure. You don't need to be funny. You need to be yourself, and you need to focus on the things that you know that'll make this speech really important for the circumstance, the situation, and for the people involved. Have a beautiful day.